CIA tested out drugs on foreigners. How were they able to successfully do that?
Well, the test that got Olson in trouble and eventually got him murdered, that he spoke out of school about, was a test that took place in August 1951 in a small French village called Pont Saint-Esprit. That's in southern France, not far from Marseille. And the CIA funded Fort Detrick to do an experiment there involving aerosol LSD sprayed in the small village. That affected 500 people in that village. There were 3 suicides, and about 40 people were carted off to a nearby insane asylum as a result of that experiment.
Why don't we just explain why it was that you believe the military was trying to produce LSD? How did they want to use it?
Initially, there was a lot of excitement about LSD. The initial excitement was the possibility of using LSD as a weapon in the field that would eliminate the violence that occurred mostly in wartime. In other words, people wouldn't be killed and property wouldn't be destroyed. So you could launch a massive aerosol LSD attack on enemy troops. They'd go crazy for a few hours. People could sweep in, capture them, whatever. It sounds very naive in retrospect, but there were several papers written by the Army in 1949 and in 1950 to that effect. And it was at that point that the Army decided to go forward and experiment with the drug. But the interest rapidly transformed into an interest in terms of using LSD for interrogation purposes, thinking that it would put somebody either at ease or in a state where they'd tell the truth. They almost thought that perhaps it could be used as a truth drug. That didn't pan out at all.
I was very surprised to read 2 very familiar names in your book, and that being Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney. Tell me how they were involved in all of this.
Olson was murdered in 1953, and his murder was covered up from 1953 successfully until 1975. Only his family had suspicions about his death. No one else had any suspicions. In 1975, the Rockefeller Commission inadvertently printed in a report to the president that a civilian employee for the U.S. Army had been dosed with LSD in 1953 and subsequently committed suicide 9 days later in New York City. Well, that provoked everybody's attention because the report didn't name who that civilian employee was. That part of the story had been covered up, very successfully covered up, from 1953 until 1975. Rumsfeld and Cheney, to put it bluntly, were part of that cover-up.
What were their roles at the time?
At the time in 75, Donald Rumsfeld was President Gerald Ford's chief of staff, and Dick Cheney was the closest assistant, special assistant to the chief of staff, Rumsfeld.
What was the most, I guess I'd say, shocking fact that you uncovered? I mean, you investigated for 10 years.
Well, it's a good question. By the time I was finished with the book, I don't think anything could shock me any longer. In the beginning, I think the most shocking thing, and the thing I did not want to believe initially when I became certain that it happened, was the experiment in France. I didn't want to believe that. I didn't like the thought that my government would do something like that. But on top of that, there were countless experiments that were conducted from 1953 until approximately 1970 on thousands of nameless individuals. The United States Army alone tested LSD on over 5,000 servicemen at Edgewood Arsenal alone.
How did they get the servicemen to agree to something like that?
Well, they offered them bennies. They said, you could have extra leave, maybe have another weekend to go home, some extra vacation time, maybe an early out. But what they were told that they were going to volunteer for drug experiments, but they were told the drug was a relatively harmless drug that wouldn't have much of an effect, and it was in the process of being approved by the FDA. And that just wasn't the truth. The drug was never being in the process of being approved by the FDA, and nobody had any intention of ever approving the drug.
Do you think that the CIA is still testing out drugs on?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think they're testing LSD any longer.
Not LSD,
I think
but
they basically, they've been through that process. New drugs, absolutely.
Do you have any fear for yourself or for your family? Because you really are making a lot of allegations.
Well, I have made a lot of allegations. It's not really allegations. I mean, the proof is there. The proof is there for anybody that wants to pick it up and read it. And if they want to pursue it themselves, they could actually find even more than what's in the book. I don't have any concerns. My mother and my wife have some concerns. But no, I view myself, I'm a historian. I mean, I wrote a book about things that happened in the 50s and 60s and early 70s that unfortunately are still happening today. Some of the stuff that's going on today with torture and renditions, if it continues on the path that's going on, that could be 10 or 15 years down the road. That could be anybody. That could be you. That could be I. That could be, our children, our grandchildren. Who knows who that's going to be?
Do you think President Obama has any control or authority over the CIA?
My perception of Obama is similar to my perception of Bill Clinton when he was president. I don't think Obama has a strong interest in the CIA. The same as Clinton not having a strong interest in the CIA until maybe the latter years of his presidency when he was forced to in terms of what was going on in Afghanistan. But Obama really hasn't had time to focus on the CIA or any of the multiple related issues. But the CIA, in my perception, basically runs itself, regardless of what the president thinks.
Can the CIA undermine the president if they don't like what the president is saying or doing or advocating?
Absolutely, they can undermine the president. And I think the proof of that is what happened to JFK. I don't believe that Lee Harvey Oswald alone assassinated JFK. And it's my belief, after studying the assassination for years and years, is that the CIA had a direct hand in that.
Mr. Alvarelli, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.